Don Tapscott, what a name. Thanks for being here again.
Happy to.
You're always a light at our summit. I really enjoy your talks. Unfortunately, today I couldn't join it, but I still remember last year's.
You would have cried. It was beautiful.
I believe, yes, I believe so.
Just kidding.
On my way here from my home, I saw in my bookshelf your first book on blockchain revolution, which I brought here. And I read it so long ago that I had to flip through some of the ideas again, and it's incredible how much of the ideas are actually more true now than they were back then.
It's a tough thing writing a book. I always try and write a book. I told this to my son Alex, who was my co-author. We're going to write this book, so at least 5 years from now, people will say it's still relevant, and hopefully longer than that. And this one held up really well.
And I'm seeing a second book right now on the table, which is your first book, I believe, on AI. Somewhat the next big technological leap that humanity is taking. And I had the privilege to read a bit of a summary. It's about identic AI, which is to be different from agentic AI. I'd love to go into that. But for those that don't know you so well as the Cardano Foundation does, maybe could you leave a few words of who you are,
Sure.
Where you come from?
Yeah. Well, let's see. I'm an author. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trying to change the world. I'm an educator. I wrote, dating myself, I wrote a couple of books in the 1980s that nobody read. I think my mother bought most of the copies. But then in the 90s, I started writing bestsellers. Paradigm Shift, 93. The Digital Economy was the first big book about the web in 94. I wrote a book called Who Knows? Safeguarding Your Privacy in the Networked Age in 95. Nobody read that. Everyone said, I don't get it. But in 98, I wrote, I guess the big book about the millennials was called Growing Up Digital. And there have been a bunch like that. 2006 was Wikinomics. And that was the big book about mass collaboration, social media, and blockchain revolution. People say that book and my TED Talk sort of moved us, because millions of people were influenced by that, from Bitcoin to blockchain. And so, you try and live a consequential life. And when things like that happen, you might feel, yeah, that's good.
It seems as if there's a bit of a trend of you identifying massive hype trends of technology very early, talking about security in 95 and about collaborative internet content creation in 2004. Why you to the power of two?
Well, this is my first big book in a decade. It comes out December 2nd. Our research led us to some big conclusions about AI, because we were looking at the blockchain AI intersection for a long time. And it led us down this revelation, really, that the next stage in AI was not what people think. We're moving from AI being a set of tools to becoming part of the personal experience. You mentioned agentic AI. Well, there are lots of agents in call centers, supply chains, financial systems, and so on. But the agents that really matter are the personal ones, digital Alex. And this is going to be your consigliere, your infinite number of vice presidents and developers and editors, your doctor who's been to every medical school in the world, and your tutor who's literally a know-it-all, your counselor. And these things are going to be with us. This is coming out right now. It's not in the future. And in your lifetime, Alex, these things will have an IQ of 1,000, which makes us kind of godlike. We can talk about that if you want later. But so then that took us into a second big revelation, which is Well, if everyone is going to have these kind of extraordinary capabilities, who's going to own digital Alex? Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg, Google, a government? No. Digital Alex needs to be self-sovereign, needs to be owned by you, managed by you, not just the data, but the intelligence that's contained there. And if we don't achieve this, and that's pretty much it for human agency, I mean, the ability to control us, if an extension of us is being powerfully, not just influenced, but even controlled by other parties, you can forget it. So these two big ideas, the next stage in AI is identic AI, and to achieve a positive future, we're going to need to reinvent the whole AI stack.
Yeah. I think if we're looking back at the past 20 and more years in the Web 2 space, the successful business models all revolved around centralizing control, taking control, gaining data, which we've seen the effect of is that whole trend for self-sovereignty, data privacy, GDPR for what it's worth, and so many more privacy concerns that go a little bit against that trend. AI agents came up so fast and had such an incredibly fast impact into our lives that whole privacy aspect vanished in a way overnight, in my feeling. Everybody's chatting with these bots, ChatGPT and Anthropic and so on, not really caring about what they're sharing. And I think the efforts that were made to undo that centralization of the big internet companies and the trend that was kicked off with Web3 and to own that and to be self-sovereign was a bit undone. How do we ensure that doesn't happen?
Well, that's a great question. And to me, it's not just about privacy or protecting our data that GDPR or a government might do. We need to own our data, but we also need to own our extended intelligence. So let me explain that idea. So the notion of identity really has gone through these stages. The first was identification. You are who you are. And we argued that your identification, your credentials should be self-sovereign. So you can decide, I'm going to give away the fact that I'm 18 and I'm allowed to have a drink in this bar, but I'm not going to give away my driver's license information or my healthcare information and so on. Then the next stage is that identity started to be endowed with all kinds of other data. So you leave a trail of digital crumbs as you go throughout life, and that creates a mirror image of you online. And the virtual you knows more about you than you do in lots of areas, because you can't remember what you said a year ago or what diagnosis you had, what medication you took, what you purchased, on and on. So dozens of categories of data. So we create this data, but it gets captured by a new species of business. We call them a digital conglomerate. Sometimes they call them the Magnificent Seven. The top 10 NASDAQ tech countries have a combined market cap of $24 trillion. That's bigger than the EU, way bigger. It's almost as big as all of Europe, 50 countries. So you create this asset of the digital age, they capture it. And, I've referred to this as digital feudalism. Under the feudal world, you were tied to the land. You created some produce. The landlord took away most of it, and you got to keep some. Well, you create this asset, data, and it gets taken away, and you get to have a few digital cabbages or something like that. So, again, for years, we've argued, no, that should be self-sovereign. We don't need governments to protect our data. We ought to own our own data. so that we can make decisions about it. Maybe you want to monetize it. Maybe you want to anonymize some of it and give it to science. Maybe you want to give some of it away, make it public. Maybe you want to have some rules. If I'm found unconscious somewhere, an accident or something, you may give away all of my medical data to any authorized medical professional. So that's our identity as data. Now get ready for the next stage. That identity gets an IQ. Identic AI. And the digital you all of a sudden is smart. And so that's a huge thing. That we've got these agents that are our personal superpower. So the need for that to be self-sovereign is even greater. Digital you needs to be owned and controlled by you. So privacy is one of a whole cluster of issues that gets solved by the problem of sovereignty. I could go on about this, but this is what we dig into in the book. We go through a history of identity and explain why we had to come up with a neologism, identic AI, to describe this.
It's fascinating. To go practical a little bit, how would you go about solving identic AI or gaining control over
Sure.
my own agent?
Well, again, a modest little proposal. This can't be done by individuals. We need to build a movement. Cardano Foundation can be part of it, to reinvent the AI stack. And again, we dig into this in the book. There are a number of levels in the AI stack. Right now it's centralized. It needs to be decentralized, open source, transparent, and community governed. And again, the different layers really quickly. At the bottom, you have the physical infrastructure. So sure, we have these big data centers, but we also have a lot of computers in the world that are not being applied to any problem, let alone this problem. The interplanetary file system right now is a way of storing information on computers all around the world, and you use tokens to incent people to give up part of their file space. Well, we could use incentives to get people to give up part of their processing as well. And DPIN, decentralized physical infrastructure, it's a thing. It exists and it works. A second layer is what you might call decentralized data fabric. And this is where data also becomes decentralized, but where a lot of it is on the device, and it's where we are, so that we get to control it. And the device being, the mobile phone or your glasses are going to be a really big one. This thing, I see you have one of those for health, and ambient devices around that are picking up things as we travel through life, our home, our car, whatever. And if we have a decentralized data fabric, then that solves a whole bunch of problems. One of them being privacy, but a bigger problem being ownership and monetization and so on. We talk about decentralizing the AI models. So right now we have these large language models that are highly centralized and so on. And they're not going to go away, but we argued that there's a way of creating a hybrid environment where we have these models, but we also have decentralized models that are running on a DPIN infrastructure, or also that are running on our own devices and so on. And I think that we can start to see a marketplace emerging whereby these different models will, kind of compete, and they'll find ways to come together and so on. And then a next layer is what we call a decentralized logic. So this is like the dream of blockchain. By the way, all of this is enabled by blockchain. So we have things like smart contracts. There's a big debate here at the summit. What's important? Is it AI that needs blockchain, or blockchain that needs AI? in my speech, I hummed a little tune from Love and Marriage Goes Together Like a Horse and Carriage. These smart contracts are about to get a lot smarter, but also we can use blockchain to have smart contracts that can help us decentralize logic and capability. So right now we use smart contracts maybe for, some transaction or some business function or something, but we're going to have all kinds of them in our own lives. I agree to do this, you agree to do that, we're going to do this. And that's the foundation of trust. Trust is the expectation that the other party will do the right thing.
Yeah.
So that's even better if we have an agreement, just to highlight that. Then the final level is dApps, and then just decentralizing applications. And, these are all the countless little dApps and parts of dApps that are going to go together to make our lives very different. My agent says to me, you're using not very much power since you switched your whole home to LEDs. We could sell some of that power into a decentralized grid. You want to do that or something like that. So now, don't get me wrong, this is not a trivial challenge that we're all facing, but it's technically achievable. And I think it's achievable, period. People say to me, oh, come on, give me a break. You got these massive juggernauts. How are we ever going to wrest control from them and build a decentralized model? Well, one of the good things about having been around a long time is I've seen it all. And I've been through the history where everyone has said that to me like half a dozen times. And then the old thing crashed. I mean, in the 60s, well, I was in school then, but let's say in the 70s, it was all about mainframes, right? And you had IBM and the bunch, Burroughs, Univac, NCR, Control Data, Honeywell. The IBM was the only one that got through. Then we had the mini computers. There were a dozen of them. Wang, Four-Phase, Data General, The Soul of a New Machine, best-selling book. The mini computers dominate, all gone. HP was the only one that got through because it figured out it wasn't a mini computer company. It was a printer company or something. And then there was the PCs, and everyone was waiting for the IBM PC. Well, of course, there is no IBM PC today, and it was the big dominant thing. And then we had the rise of, the dot-coms, and they were all the rock stars and going to change everything. And a lot of those went by the wayside. Some of them got through, Amazon and so on. So on and on, Bitcoin's going to be the only blockchain. All the rest are garbage. Well, Bitcoin is a good store of value. That's kind of what it turned out to be. It's not even a great medium of exchange. I mean, it's used kind of for that. But the really important blockchains now are the ones that have capability, smart contracts, and you can actually build something on top of it. Sort of that was a bit of a rant. But for people who say this is impossible, no, it isn't. The future is not something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. And if we don't do this, you can kiss humanity goodbye. I mean, that's kind of an extreme statement, but we're talking about our human agency here.
Yeah. You've briefly addressed an interesting point about decentralizing the models. I'd argue, and you may challenge or may not challenge me on this, that training the models is, at the moment, with current technology, not really decentralizable because of interconnect and how many metrics multiplications need to happen in order to create that model. So the latency between data centers is just infeasible, or the latency between your house that saves energy because of LED usage to outsource. However, inference, getting a response from a model, could very well be outsourced and decentralized to compute that is out there. with Douglas Heinzmann, I had this fantastic conversation yesterday, and congratulations on publishing an amazing art of possible analysis of what digital trust infrastructure looks like.
That's a great paper. Yeah.
We discussed AGI and how we AI consumers have been distilled that picture of AGI being that personification of ultimate intelligence, whether that's a chat box or a robot or something that responds to anything and everything that you give it to, may not be the right picture of AGI that we have. Because it already today, AI is being trained on all the information that is available to it. It even has to create virtual data from distilled other data in order to be smarter. So all the data that's left to learn is behind Don, is behind the company. It's all the private networks, it's all the private data. So in a world where everybody has an agent that may be trained on very private data, very private models, internal data, and as a specialist there, you get this agentic commerce network where agents exchange information based on what they know. And yes, there may be this large language model that is very smart, which can be trained by one of the big companies. But I think AGI is not one thing, but it's a network of multiple different agents that know different things. So what you're painting with what you have said before really fits that picture that also Dr. Heinzmann said, that it's possible to achieve big companies doing massive training, because training models is an intense task and a valid task, while preserving the properties of personal agents and the personal models, decentralizing that.
Well, you can see training happening across a whole number of different dimensions and domains and platforms and so on, including personal. I don't know, I got some DPIN, I might train my own agent, my private stuff. And you can imagine a hybrid model. And we're spending a lot of time trying to dig out exactly what that is and how that'll emerge or should emerge, and how we can create markets with incentive systems and tokens to create this hybrid, decentralized environment. And there are a lot of objective interests involved here that may compete and may fight each other. But I always put these problems, in one of two categories. Is this box number one, reasons why this just isn't going to work, or box number two, implementation challenges? And right now, everything's in an implementation challenge box to me. And if we get to a reason this isn't going to work, I think we're in really deep trouble, because we can't have our agents owned and controlled by somebody else.
True. Well, blockchain can tell a story or two about implementation problems.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, when we wrote Blockchain Revolution, everywhere we went, it was like, this is just not going to happen. I mean, I was at it was a thing at Davos that's public enough that I can say it. I was sitting with the CEOs of a bunch of the biggest banks in the world. And I won't mention any names, but a lot of them are around today. And they all said, what use case are you solving, Don? Use case? Well, that we have an archaic financial system that's full of intermediaries and it costs too much, and it's full of errors, and it breaks down, and we don't need that anymore. And they were all very threatened like that, because vested interests always fight against change when you have a new paradigm, right? And leaders of the old have great difficulties embracing the new. So, yep, there are going to be lots of battles occur over this, but this is something that we have to do, and ultimately people do come around. I mean, my first book, 82, the only people really came out in 81, the only people that used computers were programmers. Secretaries were just starting to use word processing. And I wrote a book saying everyone's going to use a computer, including CEOs, and it's all will be connected to a vast network of networks. And computers are not about data processing. They're going to become a communications tool. And everyone's, Don, this is just not going to happen. You would never guess the reason why this wasn't going to happen. This will never happen because managers will never learn to type. Do I look like a secretary to you, Don? So, you were messing with the power structures that existed within an office. Back then, if you were a manager and you sat down on a keyboard, everyone would like, hey, Don, your secretary's sick or something. They'd think it was very funny. So,
Crazy when you think about it 40 years later.
I know, yeah. Well, people don't type. They use their thumbs or they talk into it or something pretty soon. We're just going to think it. But anyway, this is complicated, but it's achievable. And we're quite determined to build a movement to make this happen.
Did you talk to the big AI companies today?
Today?
Yeah, like did you ever meet Altman or Musk with Grok? I don't know the name of the CEO of Anthropic right now, but did you ever?
At this event? No, just in general.
In general.
No, we didn't really.
Yeah.
We did speak with executives in some of the companies. Microsoft was actually very interesting, and they assigned the top people for Copilot to spend some time with us. And that gave me a lot of hope, that there's a hybrid model where a company like Microsoft still gets to play, but that, and, Satya Nadella, who I know, is actually a really moral and ethical guy. and I haven't talked to him about this, but I'm hopeful that he's going to think, if it's really in our end users' interests, Microsoft's going to find a way to make this work. And I'm anxious to get down with him and the senior management there and kind of dig into this and how they could be a real leader, if you like, in making this happen. And they adopted blockchain, pretty well the early days. They resisted it like everybody else. So there will be conversations and discussions that happen whereby the movement tries to convince the big power structures that ultimately this is in your interest. And if you look back throughout history, ultimately it was in it was in the interest of the bunch to come up with a mini computer. And it was in the interest of the mini computer companies to come up with a PC. And the interest of the PC companies to come up with a network model that embraced the web and so on. All of them resisted it, and it hurt them.
To probably a bit of a gloomy question, but I had an interesting conversation today about the possibility that AI at the moment is just at the peak of Gartner's inflated expectation curve. And actually, we will embrace or see another third AI winter. I had somewhat countered that statement and said, well, I think there is a time for each technology. And electric cars in the 80s or 70s, and countless other examples, just weren't at the best time because the surrounding technology didn't support the core idea.
Yeah.
I postulated that AI at the moment has the supporting technology around it to make the idea work. Would you see the possibility of AI falling into the trough of disappointment to be in a third AI winter again? Maybe even because we don't have the identic infrastructure in place?
I think it's conceivable, but let's be clear. Where are we in the life cycle of AI? You know, we're not even in the first pitch of the first inning. We've had the first pitch of the first batter in the first inning.
You think we're not yet on top?
No. This is because right now AI is a set of tools. Wow, isn't it great? Use generative AI. GPT is just great. Well, imagine if each of us, how many people are there on planet Earth? Each of us gets an identic agent. And what that means to scale the size of AI and the impact of AI in the world, we're just getting started. Now, that is not to say that there couldn't be a glitch. And right now, I'm building an agent. My co-author, Joseph Bradley, is building a tool to build agents. And he's got I work with them on this, a beautiful set of legal agreements that correspond to the book. So on this platform, your data and your intelligence is owned by you. The company has certain capabilities that it owns. And you go through these, you have to agree to all of this to sign up. But I think it's an extraordinary thing. But that's a first company out of the gate that's doing something like that. We may find that that there will be a trough, and that people start to worry. Now, the counter argument to that is around privacy. That everyone just functionality wins over protection of rights often. Give me tomorrow's stock prices, and I don't care what I give away. I'll use it. And we've seen that over the years. With initially with email, and then with initial database systems, and with Office systems, and then with the web and all kinds of apps on the web. So I don't know. I'm not a predictor. I'm just make it happen.
Don't lie.
No, future's not something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. I say that multiple times a day. I don't think I'm the first person to say that. I know there are variants of that have been out there for hundreds of years, but.
Yeah. I want to address one last point, which is pressing, and you have triggered the right statement with that. You said, how many people are we on Earth? How do we ensure that this evolution of self, this 1000 IQ twin of ours, is actually put in place with all the people on Earth to create equal value for all of us and maintain equality? Because if the Western world, or the first world countries and first world citizens, gain that opportunity through exposure of whatnot to gain that powerful, mighty assistant, the gap between some parts of the world and others is just gonna skyrocket apart.
Well, in the book Growing Up Digital in '97, I think I came up with this term. I remember we were like, how are we going to describe this? The gap between the haves and the have-nots for the internet. And what are we going to? We're going to call it the tech gap, the digital chasm. And then somebody in the team said, how about the digital divide? That rhymes. And so wrote it in there. There's a whole chapter called The Digital Divide. And sometimes these neologisms stick. I hope identic AI sticks because it's a term we need. But back then it was people who can access data and those who can't. People who can communicate with those who can't. Now we're talking about people who can engage with the world and those who can't. People who have capability and those who do not. And so I'll tell you something. This is not all that public. I don't have to keep it a big secret, but I'm doing a project in Canada about how can Canada create a prosperous, productive, sovereign, independent, and resilient economy for the digital age. that we've got great resources, oil and gas and all the rest, but it is the digital age. So we need an infrastructure. We need to build a technology industry. We need to think about national defense differently. The big danger to Canada is not an army invades us. It's going to be a cyber attack or super intelligence hacking the financial system or something. So there are a whole bunch of these different dimensions. And one of the things we're proposing is universal basic AI. And universal basic AI doesn't mean everybody gets access to GPT. It means everybody gets an identic agent. And as a public good. And there's a role for a government in helping us achieve something like that through public-private partnerships. And I'll just, if I can, just let me, because we're closing, riff on one other thought related to that. I talked about creating gods, the song, "What if God Were One of Us?" What are gods? Gods are these things that we view as being super intelligent, forgetting nothing, knowing everything, fearing nothing, least of all death. Sorry?
Omnipresent.
Yeah. And having this vast ability to capture everything in reality and do things that's indistinguishable from magic. And as we move towards this world of identic AI, we're sort of creating these godlike collaborators and partners with us. And that's something that if we harness it and own it, that maybe we can shape it so that it will be something of the divine. If we don't, it's likely something more demonic, that in, creating beings that don't bleed, and that don't, if they escape our values and our moral systems and so on, they can be something that can be turned against us, and that become very injurious to humans. They can also collaborate and maybe get together and do bad stuff. So Digital Alex, you want to make sure not only has your values, but that it doesn't decide it doesn't want you or doesn't like you. And this kind of, conjures up the AI nightmare, in 2001, where Hal, the onboard computer, says, "I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that," as Hal's killing off all of the people on the spaceship. So this is something that we need to be very careful about. And to me, the problem is not just super intelligence, this thing out there. It's going to be that we each have a superpower that has enormous intelligence. And it's not super intelligence that can crack the nuclear codes, it's each of us. So there's a lot of work to be done to build a whole new social contract. And that's what we try and describe in the book, that can enable us to manage this so that your kids, my grandchildren, the smarter, smaller world they inherit might actually be a better one.
The project in Canada is interesting, and you've addressed that in your opening statement where you said, why not governments being a factor of providing AI? It reminded me of internet within the real estate world suddenly becoming a requirement for you to provide as real estate owner. Same way as you have to provide electricity.
Yeah.
Same way as you provide access to water.
Yeah.
Internet has become a basic human right.
Yeah.
In a very abstract way.
No, it has. In a country like Canada, if there are communities thousands of miles north of where I live, Canada's a big country. It takes 7 hours in an airplane jet to get across it, but it takes almost that long to go straight up. And there are people that live up there, and it's a basic right for them to have access to the internet. It doesn't mean that governments provide identic AI, but this will all be done through public-private partnerships. And there are things called public goods. A payment. We need a public payment system. Now, how's that done? It's not through a central bank digital currency. It's through a stable coin, which is a typically a private initiative, but governments are involved and they regulate these things. They make sure that, the provider has assets that correspond to the value of the coin and all kinds of other stuff like that. That's one of the recommendations in our report to the Prime Minister of Canada. And he just went ahead and did it before the report even came out. The latest budget says we're going to have a whole regime for carefully regulating and encouraging stable coins and growth in Canada. So anyway.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that'll be out in the end of February. I think it's going to be a good template for any country to figure out how to move to a new innovation economy for the digital age.
Cool. I'll be looking forward to that. Don, it was lovely to have you.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great conversation.
Indeed it was.
I see you have no notes for the discussion. That's good. Just let her rip.
Yeah, exactly. That's how we roll.
Yeah, you may have a new career here from your day job. TV
Thanks.
Host.
I'll take that as a great compliment from you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, my pleasure.